when they ask us what is the subject that you want to explain today, we spoke about some facts and different things that you can find in the sum up of the presentation. Actually, we just changed in the meantime the title and the orientation of this presentation. So the title will be the paradigm shift in the wine industry, because we just realized that we will try to show you some figures, but the reality is that from the last 5 years and actually even more this year, the industry is totally changing. I think it's not a small change, and it's going to be something that will affect the future. So let's go. So I'm a wine broker. I'm working for Ciari for the last 11 years. I don't have a MW letters next to my name, but I did a master degree in the Burgundy School of Dijon. And before that, I was working 5 years for a co-op in the Languedoc-Roussillon area. So Ciari is a bulk brokerage company, having 8 offices around the world, and the French office that I'm handling is taking care of the sourcing of the French market, Italian market, Spanish market, and we also take care of all the clients in the European region that are looking for any kind of bulk wine or even case goods, private label wines. So, quick introduction about who we are. So the company has been created 47 years ago by Joe Ciari. Ciari, or Ciati actually in Italian. It's a partner-based global brokerage, so we are totally independent. We have 6 partners in the US office, and the other offices of the company are having a level of shareholding from their managers. We are 45 people total, and 22 dedicated brokers and experienced brokers. To give you an idea, I'm 11 years old. The oldest are probably more than 30 years old experience. We try to keep our employees and our staff happy, and I think it's a good thing also for our clients, because they have after speakers that knows what they are talking about. I was talking about the offices. We have 8 offices in the producing and the consuming countries. And probably lots of you knows about Ciari through the monthly reports that we are editing and distributing. And actually it's funny that sometimes people come to see us saying, I know you, sorry, but we don't know you. Initially it's supposed to be in the end of our buyers. We are happy that it's helpful for some of you, but it's something that we are working hard every month to make, to try to dig some good information for our clients, to let them understand what is the market, where is the market going, what are the price of each category. So anyway, but so far it's still available on our website, so you are invited to go on it if you haven't read it before. So a few facts to start speaking about this topic. I just wanted to summarize 3 things that have brought us to this paradigm change. First is the globalization, then the concentration, and then the competition. So we'll try to run through the few main ideas behind all of these big topics. Concentration of the players first. Everybody who's in the wine business have seen that every year the list of the players tends to shrink, to become shorter. It's the case for the distribution, for the bottlers. We have a funny joke actually in France. Every time there's a company which is on the way to be purchased, it's either Castel or Les Granchets who are the 2 potential candidates to buy it. But it's not only a phenomena happening for the bottlers. It's also something that we see on the production side. It's the fusion of the co-ops, for instance, happening in France, but in every other regions where the co-op movement is important. It's about the vineyards that are bought by bigger operators, because we are really facing a critical size that push some people just to leave the business when they are not even able to make profit out of their business. And we are also seeing that some jobs are disappearing. We are here in England. I remember the English market 5 or 7 years ago when the London Wine Trade Fair was taking place in Excel. We had a lot of agencies as clients. Really, at that time of the year, really few of them are still there. I mean, most of them have been bought or merged by bigger ones. On the brokerage, it's also the case. We are in the Languedoc region. We have probably about 50 brokers, 50 local brokers in the area. But the reality is that all the local and really small ones that used to only get some wines from some wineries and bring them to the 10 kilometers distance buyers, these guys, they are almost disappearing because they don't have any more value added in their business. I also wrote the wine bulk merchants. It's all those companies that used to buy and resell wines as kind of traders, but that didn't really even host the wine or store the wine. They were just making operation on that. So they were basically trading, but not having a real value added for their clients. So that's the first thing. I wanted also to bring some facts and figures to illustrate this speech. It is coming from a presentation from a researcher called Alfredo Coelho. He's one of the rare guys who's publishing some stats and articles about the bulk business. And he's right now the director of a wine and business program in Bordeaux. So I don't know if it's easy to see from where you are, but basically it's just to show the evolution of the fusion and the merging that happened in the last 10 years. This report was done in 2012, so we don't have more recent news to bring, but once again, look every year the ranking that are published by the major magazines, and you will see that the list is becoming shorter and shorter. Other things to explain the changes, we have the tougher competition. At the moment, we have, I would say, less specialization for dedicated market, meaning that everybody wants to sell everywhere. And we will see that with the next slide. The exports of whites keep on increasing in all the categories. Somehow, and we have also another phenomena, which is that more and more tender process are arriving with a shorter and a shorter time to submit this offer. So just to illustrate the previous thing that I was talking about, the sales. So just I haven't quoted the source of these two reports. First one on the left is coming from Corriere Vinicolo, from Carlo Flamini. So it's if you don't know this magazine, it's a really, really good one. And it's showing actually the global wine trade value index. So you have package, bulk, and actually the old bulk before the custom code was changed. So everything above 2 liters is considered as bulk. From now on, actually this year, if you are really interested by figures about bulk, you will really be able to look at that in a more precise way, because we will differentiate the bag-in-box from the bulk exports. Then you have the sparkling and you have the total. And if you look at the graph below, you see that it keeps on increasing actually from the last 24, so let's say the last 15 years, the trend is always positive. The graph from the right is coming from the OIV report. And it's funny because it's also explaining this on probably a longer period in value and volume. Another thing that is really important for me, and I mean it's kind of the answer that we are giving daily to the people who comes like this morning and say, hey, what's new in the bulk? Everything is new, but it's totally unpredictable right now. If you look at the consumption, it was stable or lower over the last 10 years, but it was increasing over the last 20. The world production really shows us this year that it's we are talking about something coming from nature. So it's not we are not talking about other things that you can manufacture or build easily. If Mother Nature is not happy in the different regions where the wine is produced, you arrive to the consequence that we are experiencing today, meaning that the crops can randomly change, and some weather accident can have huge impacts on the final figures and the final availability of wine. One example, for instance, that everybody heard is South Africa, because in most of the news we speak about them, the drought, which is that they are basically facing. But are you aware, for instance, that Italy is almost living the same situation at the moment? I mean, the Sicily region in Palermo, they are almost under the same contingent of water. Puglia is also having some issues with water. I took the last digits. I don't know if they are actually official because it's only coming from my weather station, my own weather station, but I recorded the amount of water that we got from the beginning of the year in the Languedoc. We are usually getting 600 millimeters on average, and we are only at 250. And we know that if we don't have a really rainy spring, which is usually not really happening, we will also have not enough water for a normal crop. So, yeah, just to also illustrate the subject of the production, which can be really unpredictable. Few graphs to illustrate that and basically explain what I was saying before about the production. You can look at the consumption. You can look at the graph below, showing these two trends, and another one coming also from the OIV, explaining the shift in wine consumption and showing actually that Europe is losing its importance against Asia and America. Just to summarize also and give a good comment about these figures, because it's almost crazy to imagine that at that time of the year, we are in February, all the declaration of the crops in Europe are electronically made. We don't have at that time the official figures of the crop in France, Italy or Spain. All the figures that you are having in mind, they are just stats. The latest have been defined in October, but all these figures are just forecasts. They are not definitive figures. And if you want to have an indication about what's going on, you need to rely on the custom figures, the OIV figures, but these figures are 1 year and a half or 2 years old. So it's almost as if you wanted to drive your company only looking in the back mirror and not having someone to really help you and have the kind of co-pilot on the right side. So sorry, I'm pushing already my presentation in the brokerage value-added model, but anyway, it was just to illustrate also my speech. So I wanted, after this kind of introduction and putting the facts on, to speak about how was the world before, and to compare that to what it is right now and what it will be in the future. So what was the model of the past? The sourcing action was super simple for buyers. Sorry to say that, but I mean it was when you are swimming in a world of wine and you are having a lot of wine available, it was actually easy, and it would have been a fault for them not to impose actually their conditions. And it was what was happening probably even last year. To give you some idea, the cheapest generic wine that was on the market was coming from Spain. Spain is expressing his offers in a hectograde model, meaning that you pay a price per alcohol content possible. So at the end of the crop, if you were a buyer and wanted to do your market for I don't know, filling some wine coolers program, you could come in July and you could probably spend €2 per hectograde, meaning that if you buy 12% alcohol, you spend 24 cents per liter, meaning 18 cents per equivalent of a 75 centiliters bottle. At that time, as I was explaining before, this price was not even the one asked by the producer. It was probably $2.20, $2.30, but being a buyer, you could come and say, sorry, but if you want this wine to be out of your cellar before the new harvest is coming, my price is €2 per hectograde. And it was working. And I mean, if we look at the traditional streams of the sales, it was almost easy to predict because we knew that, for instance, speaking about Spain, first market for them as a country was France, second was Germany. And all these wines were bought for the last 5 or 10 years only to fill some bag-in-box program, wine coolers program. For the whites, all the sparkling, not Charmat method, I would say, cuve close, were coming from this region. No, it's not working. Yeah. So actually, to illustrate this, I just took again a presentation from Alfredo Coelho, this researcher in Bordeaux, who did that in 2014 to explain. On the left side, you see the producing countries, and on the right side, you see the consuming countries that can also be sometimes producing countries. And it was a way for him to show him that, you see, for instance, Spain, the biggest part, the two biggest parts are going, one in Germany and the second one in France. So it was a visual way to show where the wine was heading every year. And this model we could have duplicated that for the last 5 years. It was not changing that much. At few percentage, but it was more or less the same picture. But now on, it's no more the same thing, basically. So, how does the wine business looks right now? I was speaking about swimming in the sea of wine. It's no more the case. So this year you had to buy early to make sure that you could lock and make sure to have your volumes. Price is no more the key factor, because it was, for many of our buyers, they were more concerned about not having enough volume for their programs than spending more than they used to pay in the past. Somehow the prices, if you speak with many people that I recognize here that are bottlers, they are not that worried about the price. As long as their competitors get the same conditions, they know that they will be fighting on the same field. But if you don't have the weapons, well, it's not probably a good example. But if you don't have the same mean than the others, you won't have any chance to fight. And the volume was one of the key actually in this battle. Also, speaking about price, in the past we knew that there was always some fluctuation along the year, and actually it was part of the strategies from the buyers to really define at the really beginning of the crop, how should I cover my needs? Should I buy 1/3 in the next 2 months? Should I buy another third after December, for instance, and finish covering my needs before the new harvest come? It was the case when we had again too much wine, because it was a good way for them to sometimes lower their average cost by getting cheaper wines before harvest time. But from what we have seen in the last 2 years, actually, in many categories, the price keeps on increasing from the harvest till now, and that's actually the case nowadays. What is changing also, the regulation that are also affecting the market. I heard in a conference of this morning the Prosecco example, but we could speak about a more recent change with the Pinot Grigio from Italy. There has been a lot of confusion about that, and if you look at your labels in England, I think you will see many of exotic origins for Pinot Grigio, because many of the bottlers, they were a bit concerned about what will be the change with this new regulation. But the reality is that, for instance, on the Pinot Grigio, it's 85% of this varietal which is coming from the North region, and mainly in the Veneto area. So you will find probably some Sicilian Pinot Grigio on your labels. You will find some Pavia, some Puglia. But when you are a player who needs to buy 1, 2, 3 million liters of a Pinot Grigio, probably that's going to be tricky to find this volume from Sicily or somewhere else than Veneto area. Other things to speak about the change of the regulation, we see more and more regions that are trying to protect their own industry, their own bottling industry, by putting a less flexible possibility to bottle the wine. So that's the case of most of the DOCs in Italy, where you have to bottle in the growing region, and it was already the case in some Spanish region. I mentioned that because with the DOC Sicilia for the Nero d'Avola and the Grillo, it means that our buyers who had in the past some Nero d'Avola blends with other varietals that were bottling that in their winery, they will have to think to another solution to face this. The challenges, they can also come from highly fashioned products. Let's put the Prosecco apart, but think to the Provence Rosé. Provence is something which was, until 4 years ago, doing well, but not that well. 10 years ago, it was a region with probably producing more red than rosé. And this year, if you are a new player who if you are a bottler with a marketing team which is really, really exciting about launching a new Provence Rosé on the US market, because they have looked at the stats and they saw that it was one product that was driving the consumption and that was also generating high margins. And if you are the buyer in front of these marketing guys, you should just tell them to forget that, because it's impossible at that time of the year to find Provence Rosé available on the market. The price is going to the roof. It was last year probably €2.50 per liter. Now we are spending €4 per liter to get a Provence Rosé. And if you can get a full container and you don't have the need for this full container, you can come to my stand and I will sell it in the next couple of minutes. So it's totally crazy. So all this changing, all this fashion, all these different things are making our jobs more difficult. Other subjects, the generics. It's difficult to explain what's going on in only 25 minutes, so I hope that I'm not going... I'm okay? Okay. So generics is a big segment of the wine business because it's used for many different programs. It can be used for bag-in-box, it can be used for, wine coolers, it can be used for many, many, many things. When I was speaking before about how was the old world and the old streams of business, for instance, taking an example that I know pretty well, the French market, most of our entry-level categories have disappeared for the last 5 years. I mean, we were twice more expensive than the Spanish ones. And from let's say in the last 5 years, most of the players finally decided to rename or to change the origin of their blend. So instead of being 100% of generic wine, generic French wine, it's starting becoming 50% of Spain and 50% of France. And now it's probably 99% of Spanish. Everything is sold under the Vin de la Communauté, so European blend, Vin de la Communauté Européenne. And the reality is that the final consumer doesn't really care about that. I mean, as long as the price is okay, the quality is good, they are happy to keep buying the same product. So these generics, they are driving a lot of volume on the market, as sold as wine, but also sold as coolers. If you take another example, the grapefruit rosé, which is really popular in France, it can be from France, but it can be from another country in Europe. And actually, in the wine cooler category, it can be from anywhere in the world. So if you don't have enough wine from Spain for your program, you can go in South Africa, and that's it, and it's still okay. What is important behind this idea of being able to switch from one region to the other is the fact that for a lot of buyers, before they even considered looking at non-European origin for their blends, most of them were thinking, wow, the cost of the transport can be really important. It's better probably to buy from Spain, from our generics program, than go in South Africa because it's 7,000 kilometers away. The reality is that the price difference is almost nothing. To give you an idea, landing from a FOB price from South Africa, so FOB Cape Town, delivering this product in any bottler in Europe, I'm not speaking about duties or anything, just the freight itself, we are talking about 11 to 12 cents per liter. While at the same time, let's take the example of a bottler that will be in the Burgundy region. If he wants to bring the wine that he bought from Spain by truck, he will pay probably 9 cents of transport. So the cost of putting a wine on the water is nothing. It's totally nothing. So that's why I came also to the point that for many buyers, they are forced somehow to look at what is the final delivered price and what is the final availability that I can get. And they don't necessarily are focused at the really beginning on the origin of this wine. They will just make simple math of saying, here is the price of my wine. Let's make the exchange rate conversion. Let's add the cost of the treatments if they are not included yet. Let's add the cost of the transport and also look at the duties. What makes the success of the South African rosé, for instance, in Europe and mainly in France, was just coming from the fact that the European community gives as a free trade agreement on the rosé and the red as bulk below the 13% alcohol. And what has made the success of the Chilean wines on the export worldwide, it's almost the same thing. They have negotiated free trade agreements in most of the countries. So that's why they are also that aggressive on many markets. So coming back to my math problem with the South African wine, duties in this case, if it's a rosé, it's 0. So it's changing a lot the final math. I need to find out why I wrote this sentence. Other wine needs. A funny thing that's happening this year that we couldn't really realize before because we had a price range of the wine that was larger, but with really entry-level price and higher price. The wine players, they were mainly competing each other, and they had no external players facing them. When I mean external players, I'm speaking about the food industry, like the vinegar or the distillers companies. At the price point that we are at that time of the year, some vinegars are actually able to pay exactly the same price for a normal wine just because they also need the wine. In the past, these guys, they will spend half of the price of a generic because they will have also a lot of options in front of them. They will buy wines with a high volatile acidity, and they will put a huge discount on the regular price for this wine. Nowadays, all these wines that are having some issues, they are not existing anymore. So, and these vinegar guys, for instance, when they need the wine, they are happy to pay the same price for a regular price than any other player in the industry. So that's adding another competition to the existing one, actually. And the competition which is, in the food industry. So it's not the same, they have probably other means to afford when they really want to buy something. Another point that I found interesting was to speak about these selling countries that are becoming buyers. And I already explained a bit this phenomena, saying that we have some countries that can be producers, but when they... Let's take an example to make it easier. Think about Argentina. Argentina, you have the idea of a big producing country. I'm not super expert, but I think it's probably around 15 million hectoliters of crop per year. This country, this year, they had 2 years in a row of lower production, and this year they had probably minus 35 or minus 40%. Argentinian wines are really popular for export. They are mainly known with the Malbec. But they couldn't... The Argentina country is also a big consumer in America. And I think it's by far the biggest consumer of wine in South America. And they couldn't lose export, they couldn't lose the local market, so they had to make some decision. And actually this year, Argentina will become the second largest buyer of Chilean wines, will become the second exporter for the Chilean wines, just because they needed some wine and entry-level wines to feed their programs. So what I wanted to illustrate through that, which is, it can be Argentina, but it can be many other countries, it's all these countries that can, from a year to the other, that are filling the gap of their needs or they are with external purchase, just to make sure that they are not affecting too much their export and they are not losing their market share for their national consumption. So it was the example that I just brought. Actually, I brought another one, again with Chile, and this time with Spain. If you remember 2012, it was the year where we had a smaller crop in Spain with really high prices. And Chile was exporting in 2012 40 million liters of wine, which is pretty interesting. I mean, to compare to the 7 million liters from Argentina when nothing is moving. And in the year 2013, they almost doubled that digit. And it's funny because we speak about a country that is producing probably 40 million hectoliters, so 400 million liters. So it's a big figure actually of imports just for a country which is normally only focused on the entry-level categories. So what can we expect in the future? It's already the case at the moment. We clearly see that as a buyer, if you will want to lock your needs, you will have to invest more in the relationship with the growers through pre-harvest contract or multi-year commitment. That's the case for the organic wine in France, which is a really dynamic segment. And to give you an idea, if you want some white wine, organic wine from white organic wine from France, yeah, you should be ready to write your name on the queuing list and be only delivered in the 2 or 3 years' time, because right now everything is sold out for the next 2 years. So as I explained before, when we were in the past world, we could say that power was in the hand of the buyers. Now it's coming back in the producer's hand. Few changes that we will see is that some of these big companies, big groups that were having their brands and that could use the I don't find the English word, the level effect of being a big buyer. They could sometimes get benefit of their position, get more volume as bulk that they could then resell to other clients. This system won't exist anymore, because as most of these guys are suffering to have enough wine for their own needs, they have they won't have any chance to resell surplus which is not existing as bulk. Unpredictability of the sales, is a kind of difficult point, because if you were used to produce every time the same kind of wine, because I don't know, you knew that your Chinese clients, they will always be there this year to take this amount of wine, or your American client will be able to buy a kind of more premium varietal. With what's going on, with all these different changes in the world, it's making the forecast totally impossible for the growers, because things can change really, really quickly. So to summarize that, the biggest key will be the sourcing for the future. Another thing that I wanted to add is when we look deeper in these stats from the OIV, we clearly see that bulk hasn't been the category that was having huge changes of volumes and value over the last 10 or 20 years, but it was always growing significantly and steadily during the time. And bulk, when I heard earlier the tariffs or all the duties impact, in most of the countries, bulk is the category which is less affected by the duties. So we could imagine that it will remain cheaper against importing a final product. And probably let's conclude with that. I mean, we speak about China on the international level is an important buyer at the moment. But when you look at the latest stats, they are one of the largest vineyard of the moment. Okay, a big part of this vineyard is going into table grapes, and not necessarily to be transformed into wine. But what happens if tomorrow they decide to produce wine and really go on the market and sell that? There was 2 weeks ago a documentary on the French television speaking about the tomato business. And for the one of you that are curious about other fields of the agriculture, I really recommend you to look at what's going on in other products, other agriculture products, and tomatoes, for instance. China is the second player in the world after the US, and they just bet the Italians. So it's what will happen if they finally decide to go in the wine business too? So in conclusion, we can say that the world is totally upside down. The world will continue to get more and more complex. It's really important to understand the global dynamics and to seek independent advice. For instance, taking his time to attend to those conferences, I think, is a good thing to have an inside view from different players in the wine industry. Of course, if you are a buyer and you are not working with us, you are invited to meet us on our stand, because I think having a broker as a buyer or a seller is a good advantage to give you an overall idea about what's going on and give you some guidelines. Time is precious, and sometimes are really time consuming. Coming back to the export or other tenders, we all know that some clients want the sample for the day before they have asked you to send that. And sampling and having this sample is costing a lot of time and money. And so, just to conclude, we can't predict future, but yeah, we are there to help you anticipate it and give you some advice to face these changes. Thank you, and I hope that I have been too long, and my French was not too terrible for you, but thanks. Yeah.